Sometimes love isn't enough. As an adoptive mom, people would often say this to me, as if to imply I couldn't love my son enough to change behaviors or heal his trauma, so I should probably just give up. At least that's how I took those four powerful words, which had buried themselves deeply in my mind, leading me to doubt my ability to parent my child. Sometimes love isn't enough. That is the truth. Oftentimes, you need love and powerful, personalized tools to raise a child who's experienced trauma and disrupted attachment, or a child who you're struggling to connect with. I am on a mission to help parents raising kids with a tricky past to show up with unconditional love and practical tools to lovingly manage even the most challenging of times. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, if you like what you hear, I'd love for you to leave a review. Now let's get to the good stuff. Hey, welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I'm your host, Angie, and I am just so grateful to have you here hanging out with me and learning some key concepts that really can help you shift how you show up at home. So, in today's episode, I want to talk about the concept of being a victim versus a victor. So, when things were so tricky in my home, I went into my foster and adoptive parenting relationships feeling very confident. I know I've mentioned this before, but man, I had a full tool belt of all kinds of parenting strategies, behavior management strategies, knowledge about trauma and attachment. And I felt so confident and so prepared. But relatively quickly, within a couple of months of having my son in my home, I very quickly felt victim. So, what did that look like? Well, in my home, it felt like and some of the words that I was saying were that I felt like I had no control over what was happening in my home. I would blame canceled vacations or canceled trips to see friends or family, or missing out on cookouts, or disrupted grocery trips. I would often feel like a victim to the circumstances that were happening in my home. And it makes sense, right? It was utter chaos at our house. I was dealing with really challenging, unsettling behaviors, and I was trying to do all of the right things according to the experts, and it wasn't working. And I very quickly felt like a victim. I very quickly, and I'm not saying that anything in particular that my son or anybody else had done, but that was my reality. It it was overwhelming what I was dealing with at home, and I often felt I don't know, unsettled. I felt like I didn't have my feet on the ground anymore often. I couldn't see my situation from any other angle. And quite frankly, my perspective of what was happening in my home was often reinforced by those around me, right? Like, of course, it's so overwhelming or so frustrating to have such challenging behaviors at home. I mean, I would have well-meaning friends and family time and time again say things like, I don't even know how you do it. I would have given up a long time ago. How hard does it have to get before you give him back or before you undo your adoption? These are things that people would ask me on a pretty regular basis. I also had some friends and professionals that I connected with um, who were offering advice, but also really reinforcing. And I think that they probably thought that they were validating me, right? Like I was overwhelmed and didn't know where to turn. But oftentimes in that validating, right, like that, the the words of, I totally understand how overwhelming this is, and I would be overwhelmed too. And, I've been in a similar situation. Those words of validation, although I think for some people might be necessary. I think some people really need that validation. For me, it really just confirmed my victim state, right? It confirmed that what I was thinking and feeling must be real. I must be a victim in my own home because even the professionals are telling me that they couldn't handle what I was dealing with. It felt so normal to really be stuck in that space. And quite frankly, of all of the tools that I had in my tool belt, the one thing that I was really, really missing was tools to shift my own mindset. I didn't really have any tools in my tool belt, right? Like I understood where the behaviors were coming from. I felt like I had a very clear understanding about how the past experiences of a child can really lead to really challenging behaviors that I I understood. But I didn't I couldn't put the pieces together about what in the world does that mean for me in my home? And I don't say that in that I felt like it was all about me, but by no means I felt so very focused on trying to help my son that I I lost sight of what I needed, which was really some really powerful tools to to shift to shift my mindset, to shift what I was thinking about our current situation. And I don't mean that in a Pollyanna, like everything is lovely, just pretend like there's no behaviors happening at home. What I really mean is that in order for us to shift from that victim state to a victor state, we have to tell a different story. There really is no way. And if I'm being honest, your brain doesn't know the difference. And I know this to be true. I remember just some exercises that I had gone through when I started working with a mindset coach, but you can imagine something your most favorite place to be. You can, as you're listening to this, my favorite place is the beach, anywhere near the water. But I can sit here in my office in front of my laptop and microphone and imagine having my toes in the sand. Imagine hearing the waves crash, maybe feeling a bit of a splash on my feet or on my face. I can imagine scooping my hands into the sand and feeling the warm sun on my face. These are all things that I can do. And if I'm really exercising the power of my imagination, I can feel myself being there and I can feel my feelings, my energy shift around that. Even if I was in the middle of having a fight with somebody in my home just moments ago, I have the power to shift the story in my mind about where I am. I get to do that. And so I know that that sounds so silly because I get it, right? If you're listening to this, perhaps you have a child who's highly aggressive or self-injurious or who screams profanities at you, or you feel like you're on edge all the time, waiting for the next shoe to drop, waiting for the next behavior, waiting for the next time you have to call the police. I get that. I get it more than you could ever possibly know. But I also know that if you can work on shifting your story about what's happening in your home and look at it from a different angle, you have the power to shift the way that you're thinking and feeling about it. You have the power to shift how you're showing up for your kids when you can really shift the way that you're thinking. And so, what does this look like? Well, perhaps you have a child who has experienced significant stressors and traumas early on in life. Those stressors are done. And today, now, 5, 10, however many years later, you're seeing these just really atrocious behaviors. and you inside are feeling frustrated, angry, resentful, um, even like you you feel like you need to overpower your kids or that you are desperate to get them out of your home, or perhaps you feel like you have no other options. Well, what if you really, really worked on shifting the way that you're thinking about your kiddo and really worked on shifting your thoughts about why those behaviors are happening? It can be so incredibly hard when, I think about like a child who's experienced traumas when they were in the womb or 2 or 3 or 5 years old. When we have a kiddo who's experienced such tricky things when they were little, and then we fast forward 10 years and you've got this 15-year-old who's, screaming profanities at you and stealing and lying and just doing so many things that just get under your skin. We become so reactive. We react quickly to those behaviors, almost as if we ourselves are in that high alert fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? You get that phone call or the phone rings. I remember just hearing my phone ring got my body to the point that I would jump out of my seat as if something horrible had happened, but it was just a phone ringing, right? It could have been, you know, my parent calling to say hi, or it could have been, I don't know, the wrong call for all I know. But I quickly became reactive. And I imagine that you are too. But the reason that I was reactive is because I had created this belief in my mind, this story in my mind about what that call might entail. I had become so accustomed, so conditioned to, for example, the ringing of the phone, that my body was reacting to it. But I didn't know that I could tell myself a different story about something as simple as the phone ringing. What if instead of reacting by default because, oh no, it might be school again, or it might be the police, or it might be another parent, or whatever beliefs that I had in my mind about why I was getting that call, instead, we can work on creating a new story about why the phone's ringing. And it can be some things as simple as, you know, trusting that it's not going to be about your child. But that likely isn't enough of a shift because, quite frankly, if you're dealing with a child with behaviors, sometimes the call is going to be about them, right? Or maybe even most of the time, the phone call is going to be about your child. But what I mean by changing your story is instead of creating this chaotic, how am I going to handle all of the stressor story? What if instead you created a story about looking forward to that phone call because it means you have another opportunity to figure out how to better help your child? What if you looked forward to those phone calls because you knew it was a chance for you to continue to be curious about how to meet your child's needs instead of worrying about how you're going to react to their behaviors? Because we know when our kids are misbehaving, when they're acting out, it really truly is a reflection of unmet energy needs, a reflection of them trying to communicate what they need. Our kids just don't do it in a very good way. I mean, really, most of us adults don't do it in a very good way, communicating what we need. And so, what if instead of reacting to that phone call or reacting to our child's behaviors, what if instead we created a different story to shift the way that we were showing up when things pop up in life, things that we know are going to happen? I look back and I think, what if instead I had created a story like that? What if I got curious and excited about phone calls and thought, oh, wow, this is another great opportunity to me to continue to figure out how to help my son, who I know is struggling, and I'm missing the mark with him. I'm excited for this opportunity to learn something more to show up differently for him. If I created a script like that and really did the work to change the way that I was thinking about things, I could have had a huge impact, not only on my physiological reactions that I was having to the phone calls, then also what I was saying and how I approached my son when I would see him next. I think about all the times that I was at work, for example, and my phone would ring and my body would have this kind of sudden panicked reaction. My adrenaline would kick in and I'd quickly go into, I'd go from, supervisor mode at work to quickly jumping into mom mode. And what do I need to do? And who do I need to inform? And all the things that had to happen. My body just did these things without me even thinking about it. But which then pulled me away from work. I wasn't, being present at work at times when I needed to. It ended up making me show up to be there for my son, even though I try to talk myself into like, don't let him see that you're frustrated. Don't let him see that you're upset. Don't let him, just let him know you love him. But part of me was still in that reaction mode from getting the phone call. I didn't know that then, but now I do. And I just now having these tools and really knowing how to shift from being a victim to a victor in your situation, I really implore you to take a circumstance that happens in your home on a regular basis. Um, whether it's the phone call that you get from school or the babysitter, whoever it might be, or a behavior of your child's that just you see yourself reacting in a way that you don't want to. I really implore you to first reflect on what is the story that you're telling yourself? What do you believe about that thing that's happening? When I think about the phone calls, I believed when my phone rang that most of the time it was going to be something bad about my son, and I was going to have to stop what I was doing and shift into fixing a problem. That's a belief that I had. I don't know if I put it into words like that back then, but that was my truth, right? I was a victim to the phone ringing. When the phone would ring, it really did dictate. I let it dictate the way that I reacted. And so taking that power back, being the victor of your story, creating a story that helps you show up differently really is the key. And so start small. Pick something that it might be a big thing for you, but pick something tangible, something that you can really grasp onto and really work on understanding your current belief about it and creating a new story. This is where the power lies. It lies in you in shifting the way that you're showing up for your kids and no longer feeling like a victim. Because, man, when you are, when you're a victim to the circumstances in your own home, how in the world are you going to help your kids feel like a victor when you yourself aren't? So, I hope you found this episode so powerful. I hope that you found the tools that I shared here, the strategies, something that you can really practically put into your everyday life. And I would love for you to connect with me. All my contact info is in the show notes. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this and what you're really noticing in your family and how you're starting to notice change. If you're implementing the things we talk about here and really taking them to heart, I am confident that you will start seeing change. And if you don't, then book a consult. I would love to help you make this change in your family because your kids need you to. So that's it. Be well, and that's totally up to you. So take care. I hope that you found this episode so incredibly powerful. Thank you for joining us for Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. If you resonated with what you heard here, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a review. You can also follow us on all the socials. Check the show notes for all the details about how to start tackling behaviors and creating a powerful, loving relationship with your child, a child who needs your love the most. And if your gut's telling you that it's time for a change now, book a free consult. I'd love to help you love unconditionally. and show you that you have that power within you.